Thanks to digital technology, there are so many amazing tools out there that sometimes it's overwhelming to know which one you should be using. In today's video, I want to talk specifically about EQ plugins and which EQ plugins are in my top 5 of all time. Now, these are plugins that I go to every single time whenever I'm mixing. I use them on every single track at one point or another. And I wanted to break them down for you. And not only that, I wanted to explain how I like to use them in the context of my mixes so you know why I'm ultimately reaching for them in the first place. If you're somebody that wants to find out about some new EQ plugins, or maybe you just want some validation on the ones you currently have access to, this is going to be the perfect video for you, and I'm excited to break it down for you. Are you ready? Let's go. What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? This is your boy 5-Piece producer and engineer extraordinaire. Thank you for checking out today's video, and as always, if you haven't already, please hit the bell and subscribe button down below to stay tuned for more helpful videos. I drop something new every single week, always focused on mixing, mastering, recording, and production. Ultimately, what I'm trying to help you do is sound better and make more money with your music. If you want help with these two areas, definitely subscribe to the channel so I can help you with that. And don't forget to smash the like button so the YouTube algorithm can show you some more of my content. Now, in today's video, we're talking about my top 5 favorite EQ plugins, and I feel like a video like this always needs to come with a warning. This is my personal opinion. This is not the end-all, be-all. These are not the only 5 plugins anybody should ever be using. And of course, this list is personal to me based on my own working experience using these tools. Now, you may have a completely different opinion. That doesn't mean that you need to go hit the dislike button right away. I encourage you to actually stick through this video, hear me out, hear why I like these plugins, and if you really have a different opinion, definitely feel free to drop it in the comments below and let everybody else know what you're using. But for all intents and purposes, let's begin this video with number 5 on my list. And number 5 is the Millenia NSEQ2. This is from Brainworx, courtesy of the Plugin Alliance. This is actually something that I've been using recently, and it's a really great EQ. It's a musical EQ is how I would describe it. It's very subtle in a way. You can do a lot of crazy moves that sometimes would really explode another EQ and cause a crazy amount of amplitude to happen. On this one, you're still getting that same amplitude, but it just feels more smooth and musical, and this is great for sweetening. That's what I primarily like to use this for, is for sweetening individual tracks and buses, and I do like to use it on my master as well. And the reason why is because it has an MS mode, so you can actually work on the mid and side stereo image differently on each side, so you can EQ them differently and ultimately get a really cool result. I wanted to show you how I used it on this particular track. I used it on the pad, so I'll play it in context and then I'll solo it and show you what it sounds like with and without. So let's just hear this one pass real quick of this track, so check this out. So what you want to be listening to is the pad here. Very much like a Juno pad. So let's play it without it and put it in, and I'll do the same in full context. So this is without it. Pretty subtle, but it just feels a little bit more wide, a little bit warmer, and that's what I like about this EQ is it's very warm sounding, and again, it's not super aggressive. It's something that you can push and ultimately get a really cool result out of. Let's hear this in context one time. Here we go. I'm going to take it out and put it in. Hopefully you noticed on that second half that the higher end just kind of came out a little bit more. And while I am pushing it a decent amount, maybe by 4 to 6 dB, it's not overwhelming. Whereas on some EQs, it totally would have just pushed it out and maybe made it too harsh or just too big of a move, right? And that's why I like this for way more subtle musical enhancements on my individual tracks and my buses. Coming in at number 4 on the list is the Brainworx SSL 9000J channel strip. And obviously, we're specifically going to focus on the EQ here. SSLs are just notorious consoles. Everybody loves using them, myself included. And I love the plugins because it really replicates the feel that you had on the analog hardware. And I really like the EQ because it actually focuses and forces you to focus on the actual sound of something. So unlike a lot of other EQs, which are all focused on the graphical sort of vantage point, you know, how it looks and all the frequency ranges and visually seeing something, this one isn't like that. You're not actually seeing your frequency curves or anything like that. Instead, you have to use your ears and dial in the sound very specifically. And I like that because I find it helps you actually, you know, use your ears, which is how we should all be mixing, and take away the visual aspect of mixing. Even though you see the pan pots and all that stuff moving a certain direction, it's not as intuitive as if you were to actually see the graphical interface like you would on some of these other more popular EQs or stock EQs built into DAWs. So let's just focus on the EQ section here. And I am using some of the other stuff, the filtering, the compression, and all that stuff. But the EQ here is really important. And on this track, this is on the snare. So let's just maybe solo the snare for a moment and focus on that, and then I'll put it in context. So check this out. I'll take the EQ out. I'll put it in. You can hear what I've done is I've just made it a little bit brighter, more present, right? Taking out some of the lows, focusing more on enhancing the high end, and just helping it cut. Let's hear it in context. I'll take it out and put it in. Bring it in. Pretty straightforward stuff. You can hear when it's in, just the snare is cutting a little bit more. It's not a crazy huge difference either. Like I do very subtle moves typically on my EQs unless I absolutely need to do something crazy. But yeah, like you can just hear how it's enhancing that top end. And I was able to get the product that I wanted simply by just focusing in on the EQ, listening, and using my ears to make these calculated decisions. And I like to use this primarily on individual tracks. As you can see here, I'm doing it just on the snare. It's a good idea of how I use it. Sometimes if I actually want to get like this old school console feel, I'll actually put this channel strip on every single channel in my mix from, you know, the individual drum sounds, instrument sounds, vocal sounds, everything, and then primarily focus on using just the entire channel strip from the filters, compressor, and EQ. But the EQ alone is amazing, and 9 times out of 10, I'm going to this plugin just for the EQ on its own. Coming in at number 3 is the Universal Audio Pultec. I'm actually using the legacy one here because that's the one I have on hand, and it sounds amazing. I'm sure the updated one sounds even better, but you can't go wrong with either of these. Pultecs are notorious hardware units that everybody relies on. You know, Drake and 40 have talked a lot about using it on their mixes, and a whole bunch of other, you know, industry talent. Like you can't go wrong with a Pultec, and you primarily want to use it, in my opinion, for sweetening. And it does things a little bit differently. It's a very simple interface. It's pretty much just 2 frequency bands, a low and a high frequency. And, you know, you have the boost and attenuation. And the funny thing is you can actually use these in conjunction with one another to achieve a really, really interesting sound. Now, I like to use this on individual sounds, primarily on my bass and kick drum sounds. I find it works really well on low end. I like to use it on groups to enhance groups in general, pushing up some of the lows and some of the highs. And I'll use it on my master as well, my master bus. So that's what you see here. I have it on my master. So I'm just going to play this track. And again, this is affecting everything, so keep that in mind. But let's just listen to what it's doing. Maybe I'll take it out first, play it, and put it in, and we'll see what it's ultimately adding. And you can tell I'm pushing 30 hertz just a smidge, and I'm pushing 10K about a smidge as well, about 1 dB. And the crazy thing was with this plugin, you can literally just put it on and not do anything, not boost or attenuate anything. And I find that it automatically just saturates and colors the sound. And that's also why I like this plugin a lot, because it'll do a lot with very little, you know, without doing anything at all, really. So let's check this out in context. I'm going to play this and put it in halfway through. Check this out. really interesting what it's doing here. It's very subtle moves, as you can tell. And this one's easy to push and go a little bit too far with. So unlike the, fifth pick here, the Millenia EQ, this one is a little more sensitive in a way. But since I'm pushing 30, it's just warming everything up. And since I'm pushing 10, you're getting a little bit more of that hi-hat, high-end definition across the whole track, including the instrument sounds, etc. And the real thing is it's subtle here, but when I take it out, you feel like it just lost something. When I put it in, it doesn't feel like it's pushing anything too aggressively, but it is making everything just, pop out, be a little bit more enhanced than it was without it. And that's obviously why I like to use this on not only individual tracks, but on my buses and on my master especially. Coming in at number 2 is the Brainworx Digital V3. This is a mid-side EQ. And basically what that is it splits the signal that you feed into it into a mono or mid section and then a stereo or side section. So you basically have 2 EQs, combined together, affecting each part of the frequency spectrum a little bit differently. So I like to use this particularly on my master and on my buses. This is something that's very subtle, but I definitely use it for more surgical things and filtering things. So for example, on my sides, I'll typically filter out anywhere up to 90 to 200 hertz because the bass doesn't necessarily need to be in the side, left and right channels as much as it does in the middle. It needs to be really, really focused and concentrated in the middle. Equally so, sometimes around 160 hertz will just poke out in the middle too much because of the kick and the bass and the way they interact, or maybe some other things as well. So what I'll typically do is I'll notch that frequency out a little bit using this EQ. No matter how you spell it, I put it on my master channel almost always, and this has a lot of great features, including a mono maker, so I can actually set things up so that everything under 200 is mono, which sort of does the same thing as my filtering, but a little bit differently. And ultimately, I can go in and change everything up on each side from the mid and the side channel to create some differences and ultimately create a little bit more clarity. So definitely more of a surgical thing and a filtering thing rather than something that I'm using to enhance. If I want to enhance something, I'll rely on the Pultec. I'll rely on the Millenia. For the surgery, I'll rely on this. So let's check this out. This is the same beat I was just playing, and you're going to see this is going to be a very, very subtle difference, but I'll turn it off with this button here, and we can see what it sounds like. So let's start with it off. You can hear it just becomes a bit more focused. And a few things that I like about this EQ, just to build on the point, is it does have a gain in and out. So you can see I was clipping a little bit. If I want to handle it here, I can of course just dial back my gain out to the point where I'm not clipping on the meter. And also when you're actually working and EQing frequencies, it has an auto solo function. So as an example, if I were to click this frequency and play the track, you're only going to hear the frequency that I've selected here. And that's how it comes default. So it's really easy to just hear the problem spots that you're trying to address and obviously take it out with your, EQ, your gain, I should say, and then your shelf, and determining how you're going to change the cue, whether you're going to have it be a wide shelf or a very narrow band that focuses on getting rid of or even enhancing that frequency. But like I said, I'm using this one more for surgical reasons. My pick for the number 1 EQ plugin on my list is none other than the FabFilter Pro Q3. FabFilter's gone through a number of iterations here. As you can tell, this is the 3rd iteration of the Pro Q, but definitely the most flexible EQ out there. It can do everything and anything. I literally put that on everything like Frank's Red Hot Sauce. Individual tracks, groups, buses, master channels, they can all get the work from this Pro Q. And if I was literally stranded on a desert island, I can only have one plugin, period, it's probably going to be this one because it's that flexible. You can, of course, do all kinds of stuff from boosting frequencies to surgical cuts to filtering top and bottom end. I'll almost always use this at the very least for filtering, but it has so many more features. You can actually make your moves dynamic, so that means that EQ curve, it's not reducing or adding all the time. It's not a static movement. Instead, once your signal, that frequency passes a threshold, that'll be when that dynamic processor kicks in and reduces or increases that specific frequency band. And that's a really, really useful move. You can, of course, change the stereo placement, putting in the left or right channel, working in stereo, which is the default mode, or using it in a mid-side mode, just like that Digital V3 EQ I showed you in point number 2. So you can see how it's very, very flexible from that perspective. And I love it because it has a lot of other very useful features. It has an analyzer feature. So if I play this right now, for example, you're going to see the frequency spectrum for the kick. You see what I'm saying here? And if you put this Pro Q3 on a variety of tracks, you can actually see a list of them here. And what you can do is you can see the frequency spectrum of another sound on this Pro Q3. So for example, I could put one on the bass and then put one here, and I can now trigger it to see. And what's really cool about this Pro Q3 is I can actually put another instance of it on another sound, a competing sound such as the bass, and it'll show the frequency spectrum for that. And then I can make my decisions, with both in mind. So for example, I'm on the kick. If I were to take a Pro Q3 and put it on my low end group and then go back to my kick. If I go to my analyzer, I can now see low end, and by clicking it, it's going to show me the low end. And that'll just help me make some more strategic and calculated moves when I'm EQing my kick drum, because the two of them may clash. Now it's got a variety of latency modes. Linear phase is a preferred one if you are making moves, especially on the mastering side of things, and you want to avoid any sort of aliasing or phase issues. However, it does create a little bit of latency, so putting it on individual tracks can sometimes be problematic unless you're putting them on all tracks, but it does eat up some more processing power typically as well. And there's just so many great things about this EQ. What more can I say here? I can even go in and change my output, of course, change my phase. I could do so many things here that just a lot of other EQs are not capable of doing, and that is why it's my #1 pick on this list for sure. Now, there's definitely some honorable mentions that I should bring up in this video. One is the Universal Audio Neve 1073. Can't go wrong with the 1073, an amazing sweetening EQ. Same goes for the Mag. I like using the 2-band, but they have a 4-band version. But the Mag 2 is just amazing for sweetening stuff, especially with the Airband. You can put that Airband on everything and it'll sound great. And for anybody that's looking for a free EQ plugin that's really solid, look into the TDR Voss Slick EQ. I love this EQ. Similar to the Millenia, it's very musical. You can go crazy with pushing, the gain and increasing it extremely in ways that probably wouldn't work on other EQs, and it will still sound musical and enhance stuff. I specifically like that last one on vocals. If you got value out of this video, please like, subscribe, and share. Smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm. And remember, this is my picks, okay? This is not for every single person. It's not for everybody. Yours are probably going to be different. And if they are, leave them in the comments below. Let me know what you're working with. And I'm looking forward to helping you guys again soon in a future video. Y'all take care now. Peace.
5,